Welcome to The Dealership Leader, the podcast where real car people talk real dealership life. I'm your host, Joshua Clinton. I sit down with top performers, managers, and friends from around the industry to share unfiltered stories, hard-won lessons, and practical insights you can use to lead from the front. Let's dive in. So Kevin Wruck, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for inviting me for episode 1, brother.
Episode 1. This guy is on fire. He's man on fire right now. Automotive news, 40 under 40, then car dealership guy, Daily Dealer Live. Now you're here with me. I'm super excited to get to talk to you, and I'm glad that everybody else gets to hear what you got to say.
Appreciate it. You know, it's one of those like proud and humbling moments all at the same time.
Well, you know what, man? You've got a lot of great insights. I'm really excited to get into it. And, first thing I want to mention to everybody is, you and I both went to NADA Academy together. We were super fortunate to go through that experience. And my first question would be, what was that experience like for you? And how has it influenced the way that you lead today, if at all?
It's definitely influenced me. And to start it, it's kind of this moment of, okay, I'm going to go in with some people that are really great at what they do, and how good am I almost, right? Like there's this moment for me particularly where I'm going into this thing going, man, I'm really excited to hear insight from other people from outside of my area and grow in different ways that I can. And so going there was super validating in the long run for me. It was, people rapping about what they're doing, how they're doing it, bouncing ideas off of each other, and really getting to learn how the dealership world works, not only in my local area, but all across the nation. And so it just was really a rewarding experience, I thought. And then it opened my eyes to, I am good at what I do. I do have the ability and this knack to be just better, right?
For sure. Yeah, no, I think you and I both kind of got a little bit of that validation from it, where we both realized, okay, we are good at this, and this is where we belong for sure, and I think you nailed it, right? Because not only did we get a little bit of validation, which I think made us both more comfortable sharing our experience and what works for us, and that seemed to be super receptive on the other end, but also, like you said, not just people of different locations, but just people from different backgrounds, different roles, right? I mean, you had successors, but you had BDC managers, you had service directors, and we just had such a good time, and we got to learn so much from each other. But it was super fun experience, definitely very, very humbling in a lot of ways. Honestly, for me, it was meeting you was super humbling, right? Like, the whole process was validating, but then I got to meet somebody like you, and I was like, man, I thought I was good, and then I hear what you got to say, or, hearing flat, throwing one-liners out there, and I'm like, man, I thought I could close somebody. This guy is smooth as butter. So, definitely a great experience.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, on top of that, we had all sorts of brands. I was there at first representing Honda, and then I came in with a whole nother dealership as I transferred through. We had people get promoted into partnerships while we were there.
Yeah.
And
kids were born.
Kids getting born.
It was crazy.
It was. And then we also even had Ferrari and Bugatti and Canada. Yeah. And what was really unique about
Puerto Rico, we had Puerto Rico too.
And Puerto Rico is when we sat down and we all talked about it, you see all this different stuff in the media. You see all these different things always happening. But when we sit down and talk, we're all talking about the same things. We're all experiencing a lot of the same trials and tribulations. How are we going to overcome this? And it didn't matter if you're in the Midwest, if you're down in Florida, if you were in Canada, or you were in Puerto Rico. We were all working towards the same goals all the time. And so I thought that was another part of NADA that was really interesting, because if you only looked at something like the media, particularly when we were there, you'd say like, man, the world's kind of falling apart. But then we'd all sit down and chat, and you'd get this other like, no, it's just how the world is, and how do we persevere? And that's the beauty of automotive world. What a bunch of people, groups all over the country that find ways to persevere in all sorts of interesting moments. And then the big thing with NADA for me is now we have this group and this team that we get to talk to all the time. And like you were kind of saying, it was humbling for me to hear all the things that you say and you do. And then also how it gets done across, the whole country with our team on our chats like WhatsApp. And I think that's been super valuable too.
Couldn't agree more. Oh, one thing that we never talked about at NAD and getting to know each other that I found interesting that I learned from your Automotive News 40 under 40 article was you started in the business selling tires. I
Yeah.
did not know that. So like was that in a dealership? Was that at an independent? How did that start? And then how did that lead you to the car business the way you know it today?
Yeah. So I started with a place called Farm and Fleet. They're pretty big in
Farm
the
and Fleet.
Yeah, yeah. It's two brothers, and one side has fleet and farm, and the other side has farm and fleet. And that's a pretty big deal in the Midwest. But yeah, so I was right out of high school. I go in, I do this interview, and they ask me how a exhaust system is put together. This is like the question that gets you in, and I kind of wung it. I had a little bit of background and understanding automotive things with my father, teaching me how to do brakes and that kind of stuff. And so I got it right and they gave me the job and it was in the tire department and they sold a lot of tires there, but it was an interesting experience. I had a manager there who he had a whole nother job. And so really he used that job as like a place to hang out almost. And then he had done it for like 20 plus years. So, what really got me interested in the car business though was they did twice a year they did a commission month, and so they put you on like a pay scale. Instead of paying you hourly, they'd put you onto this commission scale, and it was based on how many tires you sold, and then it was competitive. So the first time they did it, the only person that beat me was the manager, and the second time we
So
did
you got your first taste of commissions.
got my first commission. The second time we did it, they had these tires there, and they were like Michelin Pilot 4s. Really, almost had no place being in Farm and Fleet because there's just not many cars that are going to come in that need these types of tires back then. But I was like, I'm going to sell these tires, and so I sat down and I learned everything I could about those tires. And lo and behold, I get this phone call from this guy who's got this BMW or Mercedes. It was one of the twos. And he's like, I need good tires and I need them with this. And I was able to go through everything about these
Do
tires.
I have the set for you, bud?
It was like this exciting moment for me too. I'm like, oh my God, all this work, it's going to pay off right now. And so I sold him the tires. And then I ended up selling a second set that we had to order in, and they paid the most that they could because they wanted to get them out. But then I sold another pair that we had to order in, and so after that, I was hooked on the idea of sales.
And then you
So
got into the car business right at the right time during the Great Recession.
yeah, jumped in 07, and yeah, I can distinctly remember that there was two buildings, and we had three salespeople there, and I was working for Lithia at the time, and they came in and they're like, look, there's three of you left, and, and so there's no more days off, and everybody has to work 8:30 to 8. And I'm just like, oh God,
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna be here, I'm gonna be here. And so I grabbed a notepad, and just like I did with the tires, I started writing down everything I didn't know about cars. And that was kind of the start for me. But yeah, selling tires was the start of why I wanted to get into the car business. And I had also been sold a car by a guy, and he was really a young guy. And I remember I was going through the paper and I came across their ad. And it was like a year later, and he's the manager there. And he was like maybe 22 years old. And I go, wow, that's pretty crazy. I don't think there's anything he did when he sold me that I don't do when I sell tires. And that was the secondary part for me that made me start to think about
Interesting. And hey, back to validation, right? You're like, wait a second. This guy made it to management at 22 years old, and I'm selling tires. I'm hawking tires,
yeah.
and my salesmanship is exceeding his. I don't understand. So that makes sense. That makes sense to me, And I feel like at that age, I did this. I kind of did the same, if not like similar. When I was selling cars, I always did my best to go the extra mile or exceed the expectation because I always felt like I had more to prove because I was that young, So I feel like that kind of that same mentality that you maybe had in that moment as well, where I always was driven that way. Everybody looked at me and they're like, "Oh, this kid, what's he gonna do?" And then I'd be the first one to rush to somebody's door and open it for him, and just every step along the way from there, just try and do my best to outperform everybody every way I could. So I feel like it's similar mentality. That kind of greatness is just in some people.
Yeah, and as you become a leader, the really interesting thing is sometimes people lose that, but the ones that are really successful when they become a leader and they're a young leader, like we were when we became leaders. I think I really started to be an actual you're a sales manager and internet manager when I was 23, I think I was. And so I was starting to lead these people. And when you're in the car business, particularly certain dealerships, there's a lot of people that have been there for a while or they're older. And how do you get them to say, like, I'm going to follow this 23-year-old kid? And so you have to really say, I want to be the one that knows the most. So when they're in a situation,
It's exactly
I
right.
can come out of it, and then they look at you and go like, "Hey, he may be young, but that guy's got my back. He's got the knowledge, he has the skills." And so to be a young leader, you got to really use that to your advantage or people won't trust you, right? They
I
won't.
couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more, man. That is literally the exact way that I did it and also made it forward that as quickly as I did was knowing I wanted to have the answer to every question. If there was something I didn't know, I had to I had this thirst for knowledge where I had to go figure it out and find out because of exactly what you just said. It was this just chase for, wanting to be the guy, just like that natural leadership mentality and just saying, I want to know it all so that when somebody has a problem, they can come to me and they can trust that I know the answer and I can lead them to success with that answer. So it's interesting that you say that because that was the exact same mentality that I had. And to be fair, I was young and I had, a little manageritis at one point, right? Like we all do at some point. And, but I stuck it out, and that's always my advice to anybody who wants to move forward today is like, hey, stick it out and grind because, you've been in this business how long? A year. Okay, great. I sold cars at the highest level for 4 years, and I didn't just sell cars, I was at the top consistently. So, it takes that patience, but also that determination to want to just continue to grow. And that's always the best advice I give everybody when the conversation comes up. So it sounds like you had a pretty similar path. And you went through that hardship. I mean, you basically started in the recession, and you're one of three guys sitting around the showroom at all hours. That'll really toughen your skin, man.
Yeah, and there's only so many ups that are coming in, and there's a lot of negativity flying around. And it also helped me. There's always a blessing in disguise on when either you're working somewhere where it's more difficult or there's a difficult time. You have to take those moments and say, what can I extract out of it, regardless of how crappy it may seem or look? And if you take that kind of resilience approach to it, it served me so well throughout my career to drown that stuff out and use it as times to take and learn something new. Because now I feel like if something like that happened again, where it's this big recession, I would have a really solid plan, I feel like, because I took the time to understand what was happening during that time. And even though I was really young in my career, I was really trying to watch and understand, like, why is it happening? Why is it slow? What are we doing to create that? I started reading some articles, and I read this article in Automotive News actually, where it was a guy who had become a partner for Lithia, and Lithia didn't really have GM partners at that time, but he kind of worked his way into it, and he figured out how to buy all of these cars during that recession. And that's the thing I took away from that time. And this was when I'm 21, 20 years old, I think is, yeah, I'm 20 at that time. But I took that time to understand that. And what he was doing was he was like, well, I could buy all of these vehicles no one else is buying. There's like 3 people in lane, and I could buy a minivan right now that normally sells for 20 and I'm getting it for 12. And although I'm not going to get 20, I'm going to end up getting 15 for it. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. And that also started me going, oh, I really like used cars. That's really an interesting dynamic right there, right? And so that that was something that I really took away from that time too. That served me well through it.
Funny enough that you mentioned that. So now that we're both in the seats that we're in, I was once explained a similar theory from my first dealer principal. And we were talking about, there's always opportunity in crisis, right? In the car business, that's the way we always look at it. And that's why we're so resilient. So him and I had a conversation once a long time ago. Gosh, I can't even remember at what point in my career it was. It might have been when I first took over the store. He said to me something along the lines of when the recession hit, everybody else pulled back their ad spend, right? And he said, do you know what I did? And I said, what? And he goes, I doubled it. I said, what? And he goes, yeah. He goes, because not only did I get discounts, right? Not only was I able to buy deeper and get these better buys, but I was the only voice out there. So now all I did was increase my frequency 4 times over when no one else was playing. And he goes, what do you think happened? He goes, my showroom was full and everybody else is struggling to, keep up. And I'm like, wow, that's just, what a brilliant thought process. Everybody else is thinking about the expense. He's seeing the opportunity. So it's something I learned and took away from him years and years and years ago, where I was like, man, what a different way to think.
Yeah, and that calculated risk sometimes is what changes who has the power in a local market. Because if you want to take something that is at a certain level and grow it to another level, there is a moment that you have to say, here's where I got to put that effort to grow it. And in moments of uncertain uncertainty and chaos is actually where a lot of that stuff is born, and who the next kind of person becomes, or the next group or the next dealership all of a sudden is the one that's getting most of the leads. They become more relevant online. They're getting all these additional opportunities. And then next thing you know, you're the one that gets to kind of start to set the market. But you have to be ready for those kind of moments. And I think as you said, like both of us, as you come up through your career, you always have to be paying attention to that, because if anything, history has always repeated itself.
Yep.
Take everything that's happening right now today. I can already see some of how it was the way that it was in the market crash, and then the way that it was during COVID, and the way that it was during some of these other, all of a sudden we have this crisis going on, and so if you look for those little opportunities, you can really do some damage when you're the one that says, I have a plan for this, versus the one going, I need to wait. I need to see what happens.
Yeah.
It takes a move. It takes a power move sometimes to make that a reality.
No, absolutely. And you know what? It's funny. We talk about volatility in the market right now. When is the market not volatile, right? Granted, there might be more volatility right now than memory, but there's always volatility. There's always something standing in our way. So,
Well, you know what is funny is right now, and not to interrupt you, but right now reminds me of 18 and 19, which is really interesting, because 19, then you hit 20 and you hit 21. Well, what were we doing in 18 and 19 though? We were all like, okay, supply's kind of wavy. We have all these different, okay, now I have a bunch of supply. How am I going to get rid of it? And then all of a sudden it's,
margins started to compress.
margins were compressing and used cars is doing this. And okay, so we had this blip of COVID where everything was like, boom, everybody could sell a car. I could bring my grandma in here and she could sell it to somebody, right? And I don't even have to teach her anything. So almost going directly back to 18 and 19, I honestly thought that was going to happen sooner. I was predicting that over the last 2 years, and it hasn't really been that way. But now all of a sudden, it almost is feeling that way again. And so, take what you did. I just had a big event, and when last time I did this event was
2009.
19. And when I did those, they were really successful. So you had to take a little bit of the old, blend it in with some of the new, and you have this successful thing that happens.
Well, and to your point, Stellantis just reintroduced their stair step program. for the first time since COVID. So, it used to be called the volume growth program, excuse me, and now it's called the return on sales program, but it's back to a traditional stair step. And you got your objective, and here's your carrot, go crazy, right? I think what I've learned in the last 5 years is to not rely on it. I think the mistake that we made as an industry before COVID was seeing the carrot and doing anything and everything to chase it and get after it, at the expense of everything, at the expense of margin, at the expense of, whatever it was, you had to get there. And granted, I never fell into the trap pre-COVID of, putting 30 cars into loaner status just to hit my number to get 400 a copy. Like, I never fell into that trap. I always ran my business the right way. And if I hit the number, I hit it on my own. Unless I was really close, right? Obviously, if you needed to punch 3 or 4 cars, whatever. But, I never fell into the trap like a lot of my competitors did, where all of a sudden half your inventory's burned. And what do you do now? You're out of a job. So I think that the majority of the industry, though, has learned from that mistake in the last 5 years. And at least I hope. I hope that nobody makes those same mistakes and goes after it the way that we used to the extent that they did. I saw it cost a lot of stores and a lot of people a lot of things. So I'm not against the stair step programs, but I am against getting there at all costs, because there is a cost.
A lot of people forget about the Pied Piper that comes on the other side of those programs when that inventory starts rolling back in. It does two things. It adjusts the market price of your car when you put it back out there, and it adjusts the market price of your new car if you're competing against your own loaner fleet. And Hyundai's been doing this for a while, right? They came out with a semi stair step type program for the last 2 or 3 years now. And I am seeing through some of these reports that it's getting pretty deep again with some of that stuff. So it's
Yeah.
kind of that classic, what did you learn from the past, being successful, and how to control margin that makes sense versus just margins that look good. And it's really easy to fall into the trap of looking good and not making sense in the long run. And that's where guys get really hurt really fast.
Let's get off track as far as new cars. Let's go into used cars, because Kevin, you're a used car guy, and me personally, I was always a new car guy coming up. In fact, my first store that I really dug into, we had separate new and used car departments. So I was in the new car department. I could still sell used cars, but I was a new car focused guy. So that was where I really cut my teeth. Whereas you are a used car guy. I found something really interesting from, again, your Automotive News article, where you had mentioned that your goal was to be the number one used car retailer in your market. And you not only achieved that, but you've continued to maintain it. Super curious to know how you got to that goal specifically, how you continue to measure it, and how you continue to stay there.
Yeah, it is. It's been really fun to set a goal like that, honestly, and to achieve it on the level that it has. And what I was really excited about is I left this location for a year and it carried on. And then when I came back, it's gone even higher. And so that's when you really know that you set something up really well, right? And the way that I did that was, you have to first have a source for reliable information to tell you what's going on. And so for here in Wisconsin, I'm fortunate enough that I have what's called Reg Track, which is through the Wisconsin DMVs. And so it logs every sale and tells me in a certain zip code and region how many sales are happening every quarter, what percentage of those sales are. And it'll go as deep as telling you who bought the cars if those people don't submit a form or something along those lines that say, hey, I don't want this information shared through the DMV. And so it's a pretty powerful collection of data to be able to set a goal off of. So that was the first thing, is like, do we have the marker to be able to tell us how to get there? The second part of that is what is my competitor's strengths and weaknesses in the used car department? And then how much of it do I want to get into? And so I found really quickly that I had the ability to jump into other people's market share that they weren't doing a very good job of keeping for their own companies. And so like at one point I was out selling new Nissans with used Nissans. And at one point I was at the Chevy store with Equinoxes. And so you had to kind of look for some of those opportunities around you. So I was kind of actively looking at how much inventory is physically in my local market that can actually supply the
The
area,
demand.
the demand. Yep. And then how much of it can I backfill? And so I was able to really use those metrics to set myself up for that goal. And then the second part of it is the team. The numbers are all important to understand, but the team is the most valuable part of creating a goal and making it a long term successful one. And so I looked around my team and I have this unbelievable group where we really almost never have to hire into our sales department. I have people that one of my sales guys just actually on Monday completed his 12,000th sale.
Wow.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty impressive. And so I looked around the group and I said, man, there's opportunity here for this team because they've been here for a while. They all have great relationships. So what's their obstacles from stopping them from doing more? Because they all look like they have the ability to do more. So I sat down and just started talking to everybody. Like, hey, what is it that slows you down in a day? What is it that would create more for you? And, one of the common things that a salesperson will always say is, I need more inventory. So, yeah, is that a reality? Is the inventory right? And so, first I went back, found that out from them. First problem is inventory good? Is inventory healthy? Is inventory turnable? Does it create a fast turn? And I have a team that can manage a turn that's fast. And I did. And so then it was, okay, get more cars, own them right. Well, I have a used car buyer here who is a mastermind on that things. And so I sat in an office with him and I said, listen, between your ability to buy cars and my ability to get them bought and sold, particularly with lenders, I did leave the automotive industry the year before I came to this group. And I joined a credit union as a consumer loan officer. And part of it was because I wanted to understand their side of the business. I understood it from a credit level and I understood how to get deals bought, but I didn't know how, when I walked into a bank, how it truly functioned. Like, what do they do? How do they do it? When do they decide to buy deeper? When do they decide not to? What do they do with these things? And so I sat there for a year and learned everything I could about how the consumer loan officers did their job.
At what point in your career was that?
It was after my first group. So,
So
yeah,
you left the first group, went into consumer lending for a year, and then went back into automotive?
that's right.
I did
Yeah.
not know that.
Yeah.
Man. So
And so
tire sales, car sales, loan sales, back to car sales.
that's right. Yeah.
That's so interesting, man.
And so I've learned so many things from this loan, from where it was, right? From this credit union that I worked at. And so I came back and I'm like, man, I think I can really get some people bought on cars. I think I understand how to stock my inventory right. I got the buyer, I got the team. This is the goal. Here's how we're going to hit it. And so then the second step to that was really the third step of that was to gain all the trust of the team because I'm the new used car manager at this point, right? And so this is a team of people that have worked together for a very long time and they're used to a certain way of how they do things and they were doing it well. But how can I walk in as the new guy and say, no, you can do it better without sounding like an arrogant jerk? Get them more cars and do as many TOs as humanly possible and close as many deals for the veterans as I can to the point where they want to come up and ask me for the TO versus like, hey, can I go out and TO and give them a try? They want to come up and be like, hey, I know I'm the leading sales guy in the area here right now, but why don't you go give a swing and see if you can get this deal? And then I would get that deal. And the buy-in then was huge, right? I got
Yeah.
the senior guys to buy in with me. We're getting more cars. We're selling more cars. And the fourth step to it, which needs to be blended somewhere into first, second, and third, is what is the time it takes for your used cars to get through your service center? Because the service center dictates what kind of money you're going to end up getting for your car. You can acquire great. They always say acquisition is the point of profit, but the real thing is how long it takes you to get through the shop is the determinator of if you're actually going to get the acquisition profit. Because if you take too long to get it through there, you're never going to get the profit you thought you could.
Yeah.
And so we had to take ourselves from like a 8 or 9 day turn in our service center down to a really tight 4. And 3 is ultimate, but 4 is really good too. And so then all of a sudden the sales guys are going, and that trade I took in a couple days ago, that thing, that's already on the lot, and I got a guy coming in on it versus I'll have it sooner or later, come in then. It just became a quicker, more constant, faster, everybody's after it kind of thing. And so once we did that, once I took over a lot of that kind of market share, that's how I was able to maintain it, as I just maintain those things. How many cars do you have to have? How fast do you have to turn them? And then what is your local economy doing?
How did you, like, actionable, how did you get Recon from, where it was, whether it was 10, 15 days down to, 4 or under? What actual steps did you take? Because you'd be surprised how many dealers are actually still struggling with this. How many people I
Yeah.
still talk to that are, at least they admit it, but it's still a big issue. What did you do that actually made that happen?
So as a team has sat down with the internal techs. We have internal techs. I think it's very important to have an internal tech. You better control your cost. You better control all sorts of things, but you have to have an internal tech. You have to make sure that they're not always making everything into a brand new car. You have to know what the laws are.
We're not rebuilding this thing, right?
Right. Because, and then you have to make sure that your parts team's on board, because a lot of parts teams, what they'll like to do is they say, like, I have 2 avenues. I have LKQ and I have the manufacturer. And if I can't get it from those 2 places, then I'm just going
I
to wait
can't get
until I
it.
can.
Yeah.
And so had to have some real good focused meetings, sit down with those teams and get the same buy-in and tell them the why. So many people have no idea why we ask for what we ask for until you sit them down and say, first things first, here's the importance. I think that's what leaders do, right? Here's the importance to you. One, you're going to get more cars. You're going to fix more cars. Your hours are going to go up. You're going to make more money. And what's your goal in life? Oh, you want to buy a boat. Here's how I'm going to help you buy a boat, right? This is how you get there. And so, and I've had so many real conversations like that with people where, what's your real goal? Oh, I want to pay off my credit cards. It's 10 grand's worth of stuff. Okay, let me show you how, through the car business. And so I kind of did that with my internal team, because no doubt about it, your parts team's normally paid off of the amount of parts gross or some sort of net in parts, right? And then your internal team is paid off of their proficiency and how many cars they can get through. And so it's a very simplistic conversation with them on how to make them more money. And here's the why behind it. And so I actually did a turn exercise in there with them, almost like you do with a group of used car sales managers. You sit down at the board and you say, if you make $2,000 a copy on this many cars, what if you turned it down to $1,500 a copy, but your turn was 3 more? Here's how much more money you actually generate. We do the same exercise essentially with this internal team, so that they have a true understanding of how that correlates back into them making more money or getting to their own goals, because it's not always money. Yep. And so I correlated it back to them. And we did this as a team. It wasn't just me. I'm the used car manager at this time. I had a GM that did the same thing with me. And I had my buyer, and then the internal team. And then eventually we got to the point where we needed a recon manager, because, it's getting so big. You're processing 200 cars a month through this thing, maybe 250. It needs a manager at that point. You need somebody that can be
an internal advisor.
Right. And so that's how I got it there. That's how we did it as a team, and how we just sat down and said, let's break it apart. Let's make it realistic. Let's understand the whys.
So I think the interesting part about what you just brought up is the parts side, because I feel like parts holds are the one thing that generally really bottleneck an internal used car, operation. Like you said, it's like, oh, well, I can get it through LKQ, or I can get it, through the OEM, or I can get it, aftermarket. Regardless of all the, there's situations that, like you just mentioned, they just, for the most part, it's like whatever's right in front of me. And if it's not right in front of me, then I'm going to put in the order and I'm going to move on. And if it's back ordered for 4 weeks or whatever, it's not my problem, and, to your point, the why, it's showing them not only do you have all these other things at your disposal, but this is why I need you to think differently. And so I've had that conversation a few times with internal parts people and been like, hey, can you source it somewhere else? What do you mean? What about eBay? What about Amazon, right? We can buy parts anywhere. These are used cars. These are not warranty jobs, right? These are used cars. We just need to get them fixed and on the lot and ready to sell. So what is stopping you from sourcing that part from eBay and then marking it up the same way you would any other part? Just because the only difference is that you're going to put this now in the hands of the used car manager, who is going to be clever enough to go on eBay and buy that part and give it to the tech and watch, there goes all your markup, right? There goes all your markup. You just lost it all because he just, turned in a receipt, got it reimbursed, and called it a day. So what's stopping the parts guy from doing the same? Why is it taking the used car manager that extra effort to think outside the box? So that was something that I've done a few times before to try and expedite, but not allow it to get to the sales side. Why not have the parts guy do the same thing and move forward in that way? So interesting thought.
Yeah, the parts bottleneck is real. It is the toughest all the time. You're completely right. And what I would do with those is explain those items, make sure they know where they can go get it, and have somebody who cares and it's tied into their pay plan that they do go get it, right? When I put it in there, his pay plan is 100% tied to days in. And he's going to walk in there and say, why can't you get it from over here? I went and did a search. I went and did this. I went and did that, right? And then people start to grasp on that, and it just becomes a natural tendency for them to do it, and you don't have to go in there quite as often. So, and the other part of that is, and here's a killer that people don't look at all the time, and it helps me so much, and it's so funny, but check what your parts hold is all the time, because I go in there and I'm like, are you kidding me? This thing's sitting waiting to go to pictures because we don't have the front license plate bracket. We don't have the books. Now the books aren't there anymore, but you will find some things where you're like, hey, non-safety issue, get it to photos, get it
Yeah.
online, get it a lot, make it into something that's gonna to go.
So my exercise on that is I'm not like necessarily checking what's on parts hold, but I'm checking the service lot, right? I'm checking the service lot to see what cars are out on my service lot that don't have plates on them. And okay, that's a used car, isn't it? 99 times out of 100. Why is it on the service lot waiting for a parts hold when it could be in detail, be on the lot, getting ready to sell? And so you're, to your point, exactly right. And that's what visually always gets me, is driving through the lot and seeing how I'll count. I won't even take VIN numbers down or anything. I'll just go, hey, why do we have 14 cars on the service lot that have no plates, that are in used cars that are not on my lot? And that generates that motion creates emotion, right? That's like all of a sudden, let's think differently. And you need to explain why. It's a great opportunity to teach, and then all of a sudden everybody understands the importance. It's just it takes a little bit of explanation, and that's it. A little education, and all of a sudden everything starts changing. To that point, people watching your podcast and this is no surprise to me because I've known you and I've gotten to speak to you about this a little bit, but listening to your podcast on CDG, on Daily Dealer Live, you talked about people ad nauseum almost. I really want to know, just how important is building relationships to you? I already know, but how do you actually maintain the level of relationship you do with the amount of employees you have and still have enough time in the day to do what you need to do? I'm asking from a genuine point of view because I find it difficult to do. And it seems like you've got it figured out. So I want to hear what you have to say.
For me, every number boils back to the people, and the obstacles that are in front of them is a frontline problem. And I think that when we're in a really healthy situation, we tend to, as leaders, get too far into the fat. We start to come up with fat ideas almost. Like we got to trim some of that sometimes, because you'll be in a meeting and you'll start talking about stuff. And in the long run, when you look at it and you go back to what you were trying to solve, it really didn't make as big of a difference as what we thought it would from an executive level or a GM level. And it's because sometimes things are going well or sometimes things are going bad, and you start coming up with these ideas. To me, I try to get in front of my people as much as I can so that I can understand that the ideas that I'm coming up with are actually affecting it in a positive way. So that's how I do it. I use it as a twofold system. The first part of it is I need to understand people so that I know what kind of goals they're trying to achieve. Because if someone is achieving their goals, they're a happier person. They do the things that you ask them to do when you roll out a new policy. They just achieve better results. If you are walking around, you're frustrated with your job and no one's even trying to find out why, your results go downhill. And when your results go downhill, my results go downhill. And so for me, I just have to put it on such a high importancy level because of that. And where I came up with this, I wasn't always great on it, but Andrew Dahl, the owner of Dahl, he knows Alan Mulally, the Ford CEO,
Okay.
from when the world was getting crazy, and he pretty well saved Ford. And he did a keynote with our group, and he said in that keynote, the way that he saved Ford was that he had to get really granular and understand the obstacles that were creating problems with productivity. And you can't do that unless you're running around
Unless you're down on
talking to
the
your
yeah, down on the floor. Yeah.
your team's not going to give you real candor unless they trust you as just
Yeah.
an individual having individual conversations. And so by managing those relationships, I'm actually managing the big numbers. And it helps me in huge ways because I can look at a number and start to dissect it. And that's why I did talk about it ad nauseum almost a little bit, right? I wish in some of those points I would have said, because of this is how. So this is the because of. If I go in and I notice that my numbers are bad in my service center, let's just say customer pay is really off all of the sudden. Well, if I know that one of my advisors is going through a serious trial and tribulation in life, that's a pretty important thing to understand about why that number may have dipped. Is that the anomaly, or is it something that's going on inside of how we're accounting for stuff?
That's
Well, all of a
incredible.
sudden,
That's hang on. That's incredibly insightful. That is something that I feel like most people do not correlate a statistic on a doc to, a life issue of an employee. And I think that's one of the reasons that you think differently. And it's one of the reasons why I love hearing you speak about this particular subject, because I feel like maybe at some point in my life I would have come up with that in my own head, but I don't know if I've ever thought of it that way until you just said it. So that's just such a great way to think about it.
yeah, appreciate it. And that is why I talked about it so much on CDG, is just because I don't, I sent you a text not long ago through WhatsApp and was like, dude, I just had a 30 car per salesperson month. Like, I don't know. I don't know if that's possible if you don't know your team like that. You don't know that they have that capability, because what you sometimes end up doing is over hiring, or you don't train enough to make sure that everybody on your team could handle 3 people at one time, right? Because if you don't know some of that part of them and what their true goals are, and if they're not really striving towards those goals and saying like, hey, I can because someone showed me how, and I'm now achieving the things that I want to in my life, when they're doing that, their confidence level is like, I
Yeah.
can do anything because look at this. And then I feel I get those kind of results. And then I go back to my numbers and I go, that was the biggest month we've ever had. And I didn't sit down and go every day looking at my numbers going, gosh, this percentage is off over here, or this is down a little bit too low. Why is this retail down over here? I was just going, okay, how can we? And then I trained my entire team that way on the leadership level. I tried to, get them on that same level. And I think that's where some of these results for me have come from. So yeah.
That's really cool. I really appreciate your perspective there, and a little diving a little bit further into it, because I feel that it's not that it's overlooked, but that it's easy to overlook the people side of it. It's easy to look at numbers. It's hard to really understand the numbers at that kind of depth. And to the point where even me, you just kind of opened my eyes where I'm like, wow, I would look at the numbers in every other way, maybe other than what you said. I would maybe look to find the problem anywhere else other than that. And that is just an incredible perspective that you bring. So really, really cool.
Yeah.
So, of course, man. So listen, big question for you. Something I want to know, because one day I would love to put my name on the facade. I really want to know what you think about that because, you're at Dahl, you're running 3 rooftops. And, one thing, keeping my ear to the ground in the industry, it seems as though it's never been harder and yet it's never been easy to become a dealer, right? Because, it's never been harder as far as the affordability. It's really expensive to become a car dealer today. But it's also never been easier because it seems like the talent pool that's capable has never been thinner, right? And that's just my perspective. So, you are one of the elite, in my opinion. I mean, I know a lot of people in this business. I don't know anybody quite at your level, in my opinion, or maybe a handful. And so, you're tailor made to be a dealer. What are your thoughts on that future for you? And is that coming? Is that something you're thinking about? Is that something you don't care about? I really want to know.
For me, I love the group that I work for right now. Like, just
Don't
truly
don't
love.
don't give me the PC answer. Don't give me
I'm
the
not.
PC answer.
Would be Pete, but it's not. Like, I didn't actually know that there was groups that existed, like the one that I'm in, and the way that we interact and how they allow me to be an operator of this location. And so for me right now, I'm just so happy with what I'm doing and where I see my career path. And they take interest in me, like the way I just talked about taking interest in my own team. And so they've been teaching me so many great things, and I see our path and where we're trying to go, and we have a goal. And I'm so locked in on that goal right now, that I haven't really said like, hey, I want to go be a partner for somebody else, or I want to start looking at owning my own dealership. Is that in the cards down the road? Yeah, there's potential for something like that. You certainly want to have your own legacy, but there's other ways that you can build your legacy besides, I think, your name on the building sometimes too. And so for me, I'm just really enjoying the path that I'm on, and the experiences that I'm having. And so because I enjoy that so much, it's what keeps me from saying like I want to go start to pursue some of these other things. Because I do feel like you just said, and like I really appreciate those kind words. I I don't have that like tenacity to go after that. Like, I have the tenacity to get to the goals for the group right now
So
because
so
it's
not
so cool what we're doing, I think.
I understand what you're saying, and I get where you're coming from. So if that's the case, then from a personal level, like forget the store, forget the organization for just 1 second. Kevin Ruck, what is Kevin's next professional goal, right? Like what's the next thing that you are trying to attain personally or achieve? Because if you're anything like me, and I know you are, there's always another goal, right? You reach, you're a used car director, you want to be a GM, then you become a GM, then you get another rooftop, you get another rooftop. Now that you're running 3 rooftops, what's the next goal? Because there's always another one for you, I'm sure.
Yeah, always have another goal. Never be complacent or satisfied. I think something that people think when they get to the GM level is they hit this like, I hit my goal, I made it, and now I can take off Saturdays and let this thing kind of run itself. When actually, you're going to start learning the most things you've ever learned in your entire life about the industry that you had no idea until you got to the seat, right? And so then that starts to open your eyes up to new things. And so for me, my next goals is to get myself in front of the most people I can to help. And so on that side of it here in the world of Dahl is to move up into a VP role over the next 5 years or so, or something like that. I've always tried to look at it this way. I think I'm really good at this job. So that means that I have the ability to impact people's lives in a really powerful way. And I have 115 team members right now, which, if you really break it backwards, and why I also have such a dedication to try to get in front of people, because I feel like I have the responsibility of probably 400 people at that level, because most of the people that work for me are the
Oh, yep, the head of the
breadwinners.
household.
Yeah. And so most of them have kids. And so the decisions that I make and the things that I teach them impact all of them in that way, not just the ones that are here. And so I'd really love to get to that level for the group so that I can impact the most people that way and teach the most people I can and enrich their lives and grow them into things that maybe they thought they couldn't. One thing we really share is the level we decided to take our formal education, right? I'm a high school graduate running a GM, I think a pretty damn successful store. And it's because I have that kind of drive, I think, is what's done it. And I didn't need that other side of things. And I think you can speak to that too, right? Like there is a certain drive in this industry that you can better your life in so many ways without some of the things that they say traditionally you have to have. And a lot of it comes from you throwing stuff on your back. And how much of it did I have to literally pry out of people to understand? I remember a time I had to take a chair, sit it next to a guy, and say, since you're not going to show me, I'm going to sit here till I learn. And that's what I did until he started to just say, well, if you're going to sit here all day, I'm going to show you. So when I
Dude,
think of that, and why I'm saying that is because when I think of that, I don't want it to be that way for other people because I think it's such an amazing business that gives us the opportunity to do that for others. And so if I can, I will. And that's what I'd like. That's where I'd like my career to take me, is to where I'm being that impactful for the most people in ways that maybe others eventually got to me and I find to be mentors still. But it took some effort to get them to be that for me. So
so off the beaten path on this subject, you know, I'd like to say something and then ask your opinion. I feel like I had mentioned before, it's easier to become a dealer today because the talent pool is thinner, right? Do you see the same thing, number one? And number two, if so, what do you attribute that to? Because I feel like that's what I've seen over the years. And when I was 20 years old, 21, 22, 23, selling cars, eventually the entire staff of salespeople that I worked with, and I'm being literal about that, I think every single one of us became managers in this industry at some point. And we had a pretty incredible team. Granted, we had some pretty great mentors, but we all really got after it. I feel like I've seen over the years that change. You know, I haven't seen that level of talent or that level of tenacity in each step of the way since. And so I want to know your thoughts on that and why you think that is.
yeah. First thing that comes to mind is tough times make tough people. We probably all started around the same time. It's pretty tough times back then. You
Fair
had to
point.
be around resilient people and really good leaders, maintain successful dealerships. And we were at those,
Yeah.
probably. Right. And so, but the other part for me on that is, yes, we had to grind our way up through the industry to get to the levels that we are. And right now, there's a need for that next level leadership. And you don't have to necessarily grind through the same hoops as what we maybe had to. And so the talent pool, I think there's the same amount of people in it. I just don't think they've had the same experiences that we had to. And so our experiences drug us through every level of the dealership. Let's be real. I was the first EV salesman around here for Leaf, which was how long ago, right?
Wow.
So you had to almost be a management role for that. And then I was the first internet manager for the company that I was at. That's how I became a manager, was being an internet manager. And so
Same.
at the same time that I was doing internet management, I was selling cars at the same time. And at the same
Same.
time I was an internet manager, I backed up finance. And so, right, like I had to go through so many layers to acquire the knowledge that I have. And that was, I think, almost my opening statement is, it's a blessing at times to go through those hard times and go through maybe even a group that's not on point because you're forced to learn so much. And so then you have this extra
Well,
layer
not to
of
interrupt you,
knowledge.
but do you think you were forced to learn more, or do you think that was just you? Right? Because I feel like, you know, that's
It
what I
was maybe
feel
because I
like.
wanted to, but
Yeah,
that's
and I
forced.
feel like that's part of why the talent pool is thinning from what I've seen over the years, because I feel like that that eagerness to learn more isn't the same as maybe it was for you or was for me. you know, I see a lot of indifference almost a lot of the time. You know, people that just accept as it comes and don't want to push and don't want to learn more. And that's at least more than I used to see. And so that's, I guess, where I struggle with it, because I do have, you know, I see a lot of people on the other side of it, like us, but I see less and less of us, you know. So sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
I apologize for going on a
No,
tangent there, but
yeah. I just think the less of it is because sometimes there's a need for the next level manager way before people are ready and people are willing to put them in there, right? Like, okay, hey, we need somebody at this next position. I know you haven't had all the steps, so we're going to give you a shot. And then they get in there and they do an okay job at it. And then they're like, hey, you did an okay job at that. Now we need a GSM. And then they're like, we'll put that guy in there and see how he does. And then at some point, your level of ability catches up. And you can get through parts of our industry with being okay at it. And then there's a job that you can't just be okay at. And that's when you're in front of everybody and you got a guy sitting in front of you that works in service and you have no idea how to answer his question because you've never, ever even looked at an RO in your entire life and you have no idea how the numbers got there. And that's
you've never once opened a hood.
right. And it happens. I think it happens a lot more. And so I think there's the same amount of people, but I think the drive on it, there was tougher times. We had a little bit different mentors, but I think two, there's a willingness to put people into those positions because right now, let's be real. You put an ad out for a car dealership, unless it's something like receptionist, it's pretty damn hard to hire.
Yeah.
I need a receptionist. I get 67 applications. You know, I say I need a service advisor, and people are like, one guy who just got out the state and was like, "Yo, I'll be in on that." You know, like, hey, which is cool. Maybe he's great at it, but he's the one guy that put in for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's not as many people. And so
I think we might have just sparked a follow-up conversation that we should have that I feel like never gets enough attention. We don't have enough time right now, but maybe one day we have a follow-up conversation about succession. Because I think, you know, it's something that I thought about before the academy, but it's not something I thought about as in depth or as strategically as I do now. And so I think that would be a really valuable conversation for you and I to have, because I think you and I both are pretty forward thinking when it comes to that. And I think we could save that topic for another time, because that's something I think you just sparked a whole nother process of mine that I think we can get into for a while. So anyway, listen, Kevin, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for being my first guest. Hopefully our conversation was riveting and everybody's going to get something from it. And until next time, brother.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Josh. Thanks for having me on.
If you got value from today's episode, follow the show, leave a quick review, and share it with someone in the business who needs to hear it. For more clips, behind the scenes, and leadership content, follow me on LinkedIn, TikTok, and Instagram at Dealership Leader. I'm Joshua Clinton, and whether you're selling cars, leading a team, or building a dealership, just remember, lead from the front, keep getting better. See you next time.